and gentlemen, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, listeners and learners, students and scholars, those who are watching from the field of science, religion, spirituality, arts, commerce and engineering, the most honorable present Prime Minister Sir Dr. Narendra Modi ji, availability of respected doctors and welcome all of you. It is really nice time, nice place, nice action listening with 100%. Dear friends, you are listening different skills, manner, styles which are essentially required for our youngsters, those who have passed out their degrees from universities, colleges. Prime Minister Sir Dr. Narendra Modi ji provided skills, training which is essentially required for the upliftment and betterment of our nation and society. These are the don't do the different things. They do the things differently. Under this process of training, and fundamentals and scholar of our nation should be perfect in skills. So for that process, many initiatives were taken by our present Prime Minister. Out of them, reading, writing and speaking, these are the 4 modules that we discuss in English for learning. Structures and tactics for classroom reading of literary text. In any English language, reading becomes a primary activity for the acquisition of both knowledge and comprehension of the textual content prescribed in the style bill. Prescribed in the style in any language classroom, reading becomes a primary activity for the acquisition of both knowledge and comprehension of the textual content prescribed in the syllabi. A very important way in which is through establishing and executing a specific kind of instructional design or technique. This can reinforce the relevance of reading in the classroom and make it a better personal life. Instructional design for reading a literary text involves 2 aspects that are inextricably intertwined with each other and together can redefine the teaching of language in any cultural context. These are known as structures and tactics. Together, they play a vital role in reading and learning. Structure involves the what or the nature of the reading and address mainly the focus of the literary content to be read and learnt. The questions or problems addressed in the text, the formative and fundamental concepts highlighted. The volume of data and information that the readers need to access, the perspective or frame of reference that they need to develop in contrast or complement to the author's perspective and concept of the text, the overall plan required by the reader to adopt and implement, the self expectations and self requirements of the readers, as well as parameters can rubrics of evaluation in a classroom situation which has envisaged and specified learning outcomes. Tactics involves the how or the methodology. Tactics involve the how or the methodology of the reading and may include the reader's plan of reading so as to achieve the active engagement of their minds, their accomplishment and development of insight, comprehension, knowledge, and the critical analytical ability that is vital for readers in the advanced stage. The way in which they will express their answer and pave a way to creating questions in the focal area of the literary contest prescribed for reading. The students in a language classroom with an overt emphasis on literary reading must know from the beginning what in general is going to be happening in the course, how they are going to be evaluated, what methodology of reading will be adopted, and what they should be striving to achieve. The aim of the literary text and the way of reading it should be carefully elaborated by the tutor at the study center. It is useful for the tutor to introspect within and conclude as to what kind of reasoning is going to be central to reading and interpreting the literary content, like historical, interpreting the literary content, historical, literary, stylistic, etc. The tutor's decision made about the structure and tactics of the courses should be a result of their concept of the course, and it must be one of their most fundamental objectives in teaching the course. Once the tutors have understood, checked out the most basic structure of their reading style, they must focus on the strategies they will use to implement that structure effectively. To enable that structure to be completely and successfully achieved, they can divide their techniques and tactics into two different strategies. The first strategy is a combination of daily tactics, how they will read every day, and episodic tactics, how they will read intermittently and periodically. The second strategy is to divide tactics into two categories, complex and simple. Most simple tactics comprise ways of motivating shy and difficult and diffident students who do not volunteer to read, answer, and participate in a discussion. Persuading those students to summarize what other students have read and narrated, encouraging those students to articulate the purpose of an assignment or to express the question in the classroom. These are rather easy to apply and can be time saving as well as attention garnering. On the other hand, complex tactics like teaching students how to read critically, creating an oral test rubrics, developing parameters and techniques for self-assessment of the student are more elaborate, as these complex strategies have multiple parts and often require an extended period of time to be executed. They are generally more difficult to implement. Thus, instructional design in a leading lesson requires the choices a tutor makes while thinking about instruction in both structural and tactical ways. Overall structure thinking, for example, about the concept for the course, can help free a tutor from the didactic model of instruction into which they may have been conditioned, and this can also eliminate the ineffective teaching that invariably and frequently happens through one-sided lecturing during reading a text in a classroom. Simple and complex tactical thinking can provide the means by which teachers can follow through on their structural decisions in an effective way. Teaching will not be transformed simply because teachers philosophically believe in the value of critical thinking. They must find practical ways to bring it into instruction, but structurally and tactically. Developing awareness for effective reading. There are several faulty assumptions that contribute to ineffective reading of a literary text. Some of them are explained. Knowledge ensures better reading. Knowledge of literary content is vital, but adequate knowledge does not guarantee effective reading. It is practice which makes reading perfect, and focus on developing that practice is usually at the expense of the belief that since I know, thus I. The result is that the term knowledgeable reader can be attributed to a very small group, and many remain frustrated in their attempts to communicate openly and effectively about their reading. Thus, one must never read with overconfidence in one's prior knowledge of the text. Good readers are born, not made. Research has clearly stated the salient dimension of effective reading. These are skills that are not necessarily innate and may be skillfully acquired with persistent practice. The individual differences between readers may make it simpler for some to acquire certain skills in comparison to others, as is the case in acquiring knowledge of content. Thus, no one is born a reader, although one may have an innate penchant for reading. The hobby and habit of reading can be honed and perfected only by repeated practice and greater exposure to books. Readers must focus on only content-based meaning and note the subtler and deeper nuances. Subtler and deeper nuances. This assumption is erroneous and flawed, as it highlights the text and not the individual. It is equivalent to the view that the prescribed reading texts are important, but the reader's interpretation of them is not. In this case, one must remember that content is both fluid and dynamic. It can transform with transforming curriculum and subjective experiences of life. It can evolve, accumulate, and when readers try to include more content in their experiences, they quickly exhaust the capacity of such an endeavor. What they need to do is read gradually. What they need to do is read gradually and intently to analyze, evaluate, criticize, and collaborate with others to create new knowledge or find layers and nuances of interpretation beyond the superficial realm of facts and assertion. Readers must explore content not as an end but as the means by which larger objectives can be accomplished. Reading effectively includes an understanding of both superficial meaning and embedded meaning. A lack of efficacy on the part of a reader leads to a narrow repertoire of instructional techniques and practices, and the inability to adjust to changes in pedagogical context and demands. On the other hand, introspecting on one's own reading practice, adding to one's repertoire, the focusing on learning helps readers discover value in their reading of a literary text. Developing efficacy in reading. There are various graded steps that should be meticulously followed to improve the efficacy of reading a literary text. Analyzing the need for reading awareness. Before reading a literary text, one must introspect to analyze the need and purpose of reading that text. The strategies one will use in and out of the classroom for reading that text and how they will structure their reading in different ways. Establishing learning parameters for reading. One must introspect further to analyze the extent of content mastery readers need to be achieved and why. What specific skills do they need to acquire and why? Will the readers ascertain if they have achieved the mastery of content and acquired the specific skills? These questions can trigger the need for the reader to establish learning parameters independently and automatically and autonomously. Choice of amendments. The reader in the classroom must recognize the need for and how it must be implemented in the ambit of their reading. This can be done by trying to begin by changing reading strategies and practices that are in conflict with the literary content or the instructional setting or that do not lead to the learning outcomes envisaged for the reading of textual content. Implementing the changes in reading style and strategy as well as the variety of text for reading must be made in small ways and implemented slowly and gradually by the tutor and then by the reader. Irrational must be projected for each part of the reading assignments and assessment in the classroom situation so that the reader will better understand why they are reading or completing a project and what the parameters of their assessments are. Establishing cognitive outcomes and objectives. Cognitive outcomes and objectives include parameters of knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis and evaluation. Knowledge requires memorizing facts, definition, etc. And this requires superficial understanding of the literary text. Comprehension requires understanding material of the literary text and demands that the learner explain the content lucidly and cogently. Application requires using abstract ideas in concrete situations, and it demands that students manifest the ability to solve simple problems that may emerge while reading the literary text. Analysis refers to the process of breaking down an idea into its individual components in the course of the reading of a literary text. Synthesis refers to the process of combining of multiple parts of literary content or linguistic inputs to create a new holistic and integral content, and this can lead to research, creativity and open-ended interpretation of the literary text. Evaluation involves making a performance-based assessment and articulating the criteria for the assessment after the reading of the literary text. Setting clear objectives for each topic in the reading activity of literary text will help clarify for students why and how they are being asked to perform certain tasks after intensive reading. The process of reading literary text. The process of reading literary text can be essentially divided into three stages. They are the recognition stage, the structuring stage, and interpretation stage. The recognition recognizes the graphic counterparts of the phonological items. Here the reader recognizes the spoken words in their written form and associates accurately the sounds of corresponding with the alphabet combinations or words and phrases. The structuring stage is one where the reader sees the syntactic relationships of the items and understands the structural meaning of the syntactic units in a block of the literary text. The interpretation stage is the highest level in the process of reading. It is the stage where the reader can grasp the importance of a word, phrase, or a sentence and can see beyond superficial connotations to an inner meaning or the implication of a statement. This is the ultimate goal to be attained in the process of reading. Reading is of two kinds, intensive and extensive. Intensive reading is a way of closely reading a text for accuracy and should ideally be done under the supervision of the teacher. It compels the learners to pay particular attention to the text, content, stylistic features, tone, and structure of the text. It involves the profound and detailed understanding of the text. It is primarily concerned with the developing of the following reading and comprehension strategies: judgment reasoning, judgment reading, reasoning, following reading and comprehension strategies: judgment, reasoning, interpretation, appreciation. Intensive reading is more an exercise in accuracy. Readers who are practicing this kind of reading do not read a text and only for a specific purpose of information, but also to assess and analyze the impact on the reader of a writer's attention, arguments, ideas, styles, etc. Extensive reading or reading for fluency involves reading of longer text for pleasure, and it may be both speedy and cursory. It may not notice the fine points of the writing and the minute details. It is a leisurely and independent activity in which the reader is the autonomous reader, not guided by any scholarly mentor or expert. Readers who practice this kind of reading may read independently and autonomously and be self-paced. This is also called rapid reading or independent silent reading. The specific objectives of extensive reading are to understand the meaning at a to develop a taste for reading, to develop the habit of reading for pleasure, to concentrate upon literary content rather than literary form. The term extensive reading meant to read silently and quickly and trains the reader to understand the subject matter efficiently. It plays a vital role in the learning of second or foreign language. In a classroom situation, the students are made to read as much as possible, and the reading text selected for them or by them are within the linguistic competence of the reader. There are hardly any follow-up activities that demands academic engagement with the text, and so this creates interest among the learners. They learn to read faster without any external hindrance or fear of consequences, developing literary reading ability. Any holistic understanding of a literary text depends upon how thoroughly it is read. It may be read with a superficial comprehension or an in-depth comprehension. Reading is a complex skill which involves a number of operations which may occur or proceed simultaneously. A reader who has acquired the skills of comprehending literary matter will invariably have the ability to read a passage at an average or normal speed accepted as the norm in that level of education, understand the structured and lexical meanings of the words, phrases and sentences used in the passage, read aloud with correct pronunciation, accent, stress and intonation, make an accurate conjecture about the meaning of an unknown word form from the context in which it is used, consult a dictionary to find out the meaning of an unfamiliar word if contextual conjecture is elusive. Find the required information by skimming through the entire page of a literature passage. Read silently without moving the lips. Read silently without moving the lips and have a balanced eye movement while reading and enable retention at the same rate. Identify of the entire literary passage and of every paragraph. Make a summary of the important points of the passage after reading and comprehension. Examine the text from the writer's point of view and infer the mood, opinion, style and focus of the writer. Identify the technicalities of writing such as punctuation, paragraph identity, paragraph indentation, paragraph indentation, sentence structure, syntax patterns, etc. Identify and analyze the appropriateness of the figure of speech used by the writer and illustrate their efficacy in enhancing the content or detracting from it. Reading a literary text prose. A literary prose text is a work of literature expressed the ordinary grammatical structure and natural flow of language rather than rhythmic structures as applied in traditional poetry. This simplicity and flexibility of the structure of literary prose has led to its use in spoken dialogue, factual discourse, as well as topical and fictional writing. It is commonly used in literature, newspapers, magazines, encyclopedia, broadcasting, film, history, philosophy, law, and many other forms of communication. Prose literature is usually contained in textbooks written according to the structural approach, graded with each lesson elaborating paradigms and patterns of vocabulary and structure. Literary prose passages must be read with a primary purpose of learning the language and understanding the main idea. Thus, the way to progress in the literary reading of a prose passage is to read with comprehension, as this enables the readers to acquire new vocabulary and discern language patterns used. Reading literary prose enable the readers to understand the passage, to read fluently, to enrich their vocabulary, and to acquire and knowledge a multiplicity of perspectives. Effective prose reading strategies. Effective prose reading strategies may require the fragmentation of a prose passage into smaller sections for better understanding. This fragmentation or breaking up of the text allows for multiple close readings to ensure that students involve their own thinking in the text as they read. Repeated reading helps to enhance comprehension and familiarize the reader with an author's style of writing. Methods of reading prose may also include organizing and facilitating group discussions where readers share their subjective impressions about the reading. The entire group thus benefits from being exposed to a multiplicity of reader responses and perspectives in a group discussion. If one reads the essay of Studies by Francis Bacon, one can see that it is one of the best specimens of literary non-fictional prose. The process to read this is very elaborate. A cursory reading of this must be followed by a deep and close reading done several times. Repeated reading will evoke keener observation of the nuances of interpretation that may have been missed the first time. The readers must employ active reading strategies at the beginning of the essay. First, they must observe what is on the page, the facts, the pithy sentences, the punctuation break, and the tripartite structure of each idea. Tripartite tripartite structure of each idea, then they should pay close attention to patterns, connections, repetition, or contradictions. Eventually, they must discover the theme of the text, what the author intended for the reader to understand. Therefore, after they can arrive at their own analysis of the elements of the literary text. An example of a literary fictional prose text may be the short story by Catherine Mansfield called The Fly. This must also be read multiple times to gain familiarity with the text, authorial style, and mode of narration. Thereafter, the readers will find answers to both literal and inferential questions that they may ask themselves while reading: who, what, when, where, and how. Readers may then progress to understand everything and realize that a situation or item would not be in the text if there was no reason for it. Finally, the readers will arrive at an understanding of the main theme and the various layers of meaning, or what the author intended for the reader to understand. At the beginning of the reading process, however, the readers must inculcate in themselves the knowledge of literary terminology, such as elements of fiction, that is, point of view, character setting, plot, structure, and theme, and why writers use them. This may be done in a study center, teaching situation, or through self-learning material available. Reading a literary text, poetry. There is a specific way of reading a poetical text to interpret it at various levels. While reading, readers of poetry begin by close reading or line by line reading of a poem. In this situation, literary theory is not applied at all. A comprehensive pattern which is indicative and representative of the repertoire of techniques that readers may summon is explained thus. Readers first and foremost read the surface meaning of the prescribed poem meticulously and accurately. In doing this, they recognize the importance of the precise literal words of the text and do not take liberties with them. For example, Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare discussed contains the line, "Rag winds do shake the darling birds of May." This is not only a direct allusion to the loveliness of spring, but also a reminder of the harshness of nature in summer, which is a season of unmoderated extremes. Readers can then go on to identify stages and phases within a literary work. Some of these are firmly marked by divisions like stanzas, quatrains, cantos, or verses. Across these, there is a moment when the exposition phase slides into the development phase and author phase begins, when the development has put everything in place for the denouement or the conclusion. The reader needs to be aware of the moment when the introduction of setting and characters pivots into the first significant incident or choice or denial. For example, in William Shakespeare's Sonnet 73, it is important to decide whether the three stages of aging are meant to represent some kind of progression and development or just three static examples of the same thing. Readers then read to discern an overall structural pattern or the scaffolding of a structural frame. These can be called macro patterns to distinguish them from the smaller scale or micro patterning. For example, two elements in a poem be paired and contrasted throughout. The contrast may be supported by image patterns linked to each. For example, the lamb and the tiger, taken respectively from William Blake's poetic anthologies called Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. Once the structural pattern has been perceived, a multiple layered interpretation can be discovered. After discovering the overarching structural patterns, readers can progress to identify micro patterns such as series of words with the same tone or register or flavor. Often the significant point is where the perceived pattern is broken, for the subject specified or articulated must have been chosen either in spite of breaking the pattern or is thereby foregrounded because it breaks the pattern. Readers can then progress to read minutely to discern the similarity beneath the apparent contrast or vice versa. The two elements or subjects such as the tiger and the yam and the lamb in Blake's poems may be represented at first as the opposite of each other, but a close reading shows that what at first seemed true is actually untrue and they are opposite but not in the way that first appeared. They must be seen as complementary and contrasting but not diametrically opposites. Readers can be further led while reading to also distinguish between overt and covert. Overt and covert meaning or between apparent content and real content. The superficial and most obvious meaning should be read first and then focus on the innermost and multi-layered implications of the content. This can be applied to the epic simile of Saturn being compared to the Leviathan in Book 1 of Paradise Lost by John Milton. The overt similarity is that of the gigantic size, but the covert meaning hints to a deeper similarity of the treacherous nature of both the creatures. Readers of a poem develop a sensitivity towards distinguishing between meaning and significance. Meaning is the essence contained within the work, whereas significance is the perspective or impression the readers perceive in the literary text, sometimes which is necessarily fluid and shifting. Significance may alter with thought, analysis and perspectives, etc. The same thing can be understood differently by different classes or genders. This can be seen in the dichotomy of the surface meaning of the seasonal aspects and ripe sensuousness of autumn in To Autumn by John Keats, which actually articulates a deeper significance of poignant mortality. Readers of poetry often read the poem Readers of poetry often read the poem in terms of genre or literary type and introspect the ways and interrogate the ways in which the literary genre affects the content of the work. For example, readers will be aware while reading of how the ballad form intensifies the content of Lochinvar by Walter Scott or the Inchcap Rock by Robert Southey, or how the sonnet framework enhances the significance of the content of How Do I Love Thee by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, or how the dramatic monologue adds dimension to the characterization in My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Readers also frequently read the literal as metaphorical while reading poems. For example, in Ted Hugg's poem Hawk Roosting, the poet depicts the hawk roosting, and this is implicitly articulated to symbolize power, position, supremacy, and callous disregard for the lesser creatures. This kind of interpretation is very common in the reading of poetry. Readers also read with a keen and careful awareness of semantic association and word order. For instance, in the poem by Nissim Ezekiel titled Goodbye Party for Miss Pushpa T.S., there are highly amusing Indianized errors of grammar and expression showing the colloquial and regional use of adapted English and making the reader both laugh and at the same time identify and understand the incorrectness of the language used. This leads us to realize the reader read the literary poetic text with a keen awareness of the changes in the meanings of words. These are some of the main ways in which readers and critics engage with literary texts and begin to analyze the poems and interpret them. Thus, we must acknowledge that readers will always need these elements of interpretation. Reading comprehension types of text. Comprehension type of text. Expository text. Comprehension simply means understanding. It is the end goal of the act of reading. Comprehension then can also be called as the reason for reading. Comprehension can also be called as the reason for reading. If the act of reading occurs without an understanding of what is being read, then the whole act becomes obsolete and redundant. If you don't understand them, there is no point to reading. The process of understanding is also complex. It employs a number of strategies and meticulous practices. To tackle the comprehension of an expository text, you need to first understand the basic aspects of such a categorical form of writing. Let us look at the word expository. The word expose could be derived from it, the definition of which reads as make visible, be uncovering it. You can then say that to expose, one would have to explain, to uncover something or a situation. Expository writing then is categorically concerned with explanation. However, you should not confuse this form of explanation with that of descriptive or narrative writing form. Even though all of these three forms, expository, narrative and descriptive, employ the act of explanations, they do it differently. It is hence important for you to understand how explanations are projected in the expository form of writing. What is expository text? The explanation is The explanations in expository writing are of many kinds. The steps to explain a process, the reasons compiled as arguments to support a thesis statement or any other form. You will be able to find a logical sequence of structure, smooth transitions and a thesis statement. When writing an expository text, you will have to assume that the reader has no prior information regarding the subject and hence would have to use meticulous and carefully directed instructions and explanations to make your reader understand. This form of writing is also used when typing to supplement reasons or make another understand why or how something happens. As a rule, then this form of writing needs to be extremely precise and clear in its style, lest the reader is unable to get clarity of the message. Types of expository text. Before we get to reading a sample of an expository essay, it would be useful to be able to identify the type of essay. Writings in expository text can be summed up to be of a total of 6 categories. This style of writing can be used to determine the cause and effect of any phenomena, problem and solution of certain situation for different kinds of classification, for the development of comparison and contrast, determining a definition and detailing a process. Cause and effect. As the name suggests, the cause and effect essay concerns itself with the occurrence of a situation and a description of the consequences for the same. Reading the process of writing such an essay, Joshua Tatum, a professor of literature and English composition, writes that in such essay, a young writer must pay attention to the primary causes and results. The contributory things are not necessary, but it is possible to include some of them. If a person is running out of ideas, immediate reasons and outcomes generate the cause and effect directly, unlike remote ones which cannot be noticed with a naked eye. The writing of a cause and effect essay entails the creation of a thesis statement. A thesis statement is the singular and most important central idea or opinion stated in a clear and concise way. All essays or writing pieces inherently have a thesis statement which can be usually perceived through the title of the text. Hence, as the reader of such a text, you need to discover time a title in a comprehension passage is missing. It is done so that the reader can be tested on their understanding skills without having read the main title in order to figure out the thesis statement of the essay. An example of a thesis statement is the Indian government must provide free schooling for every child in the country because literate citizens have more chances to be employed and add up to the country's wealth. Though an essay that discusses such a point of view, cause and effect needs to be identified. You could identify the cause of the government of India not providing free education, or you could identify the cause for the requirement of the free education. Once a cause has been identified, the effects would also be recognized. For example, you can say in the above thesis statement that the effect of free education would be a better financial status of the country, leading to its economic development. You should keep in mind that the same thesis statement can be written in different kinds of essays. It could be written as an argumentative essay, a descriptive essay, or a narrative essay as well. However, it would qualify as an expository essay if the treatment is on the cause and effect. Problem and solution. It entails the assertion of a problem and then providing a list of solutions for the same. As writing, this would involve you to look at a problem from a number of directions and perspectives. As a reader, then, it is imperative to identify all these angles to the problem presented. If you manage to understand the problem from various perspectives, then you will be able to not only understand but analyze the solution provided. This sort of essay involves argumentation in that writer seeks to convince the reader to take a particular course of action. In explaining the problem, it may also need to persuade the reader concerning specific causes. Just like the cause and effect text, a problem and solution text also has a thesis statement. Dorothy J. Mark and Lennon Stafford Yilmaz in Writers at Work. The essay Cambridge University Press 2008 say, in a problem solution essay, the thesis statement usually proposes the solution. Because readers must first understand the problem, the thesis statement usually comes after a description of the problem. The thesis statement does not have to give details about the solution. Instead, it summarizes the solution. It should also lead naturally to the body of the essay, preparing your reader for a discussion of how your solution would work. Essentially, then you as a reader need to gain a comprehensive understanding of not only the problem but also the solutions provided. Classification takes into account a comprehension. It takes into account a comprehensive subject. Demarcated into various groups or categories. After giving a brief explanation about the subject overall, the writer is expected to then explain the parts in detail and with examples. The first section of such a piece of writing would contain thesis statement, while the body of the essay would follow through with description of the groups formed. The conclusions would provide a summarization of the groups along with providing a basis for the creation of this group. A reader, you will need to understand these sections of the essay. Once you are able to identify the different groups, the reason or the basis for them being made into the groups, along with the thesis statement, you will be able to master the comprehension of the given text. An example of an introductory paragraph to a classification essay. It's cold evening in January, and all across the country, Indians are gathering to watch a match of international cricket armed with armed with samosas and cold drinks. Samosas and cold drinks. They stroll to their seats, some in grand stadium, others in cozy parks. But no matter where the match is played, you will find the same three types of cricket fans: the party rooter, the sunshine supporter, and the dehydrated fan. You can notice here how categories have been clearly stated. This enables the reader to expect a detailed description of the said groups, comparison and contrast. This requires the presence of two entities. This requires the presence of two entities. It concentrates on the similarities and differences between any two ideas, things or situations. Each contrast or similarity is taken with reference to the other. You need to understand the process of working on the thesis statement, keeping in mind a comparative entity always when referring to one. Once all the points are laid down in the body of the essay, the conclusion explains and sums up the thesis statement further. As a reader of this kind of writing, then it is required that you are able to align the two entities with each other on the basis of their similarities and dissimilarities. You are expected to comprehend the distinct features of the two things through their comparison. Definition: the kind of an essay, as the name suggests, deals primarily with the process of defining any particular term, concept or thing. Writing of this essay entails that in the introductory passage we add a standard, clear and precise definition of the concept being explained. Henceforth, we give an explanation of the given words according to our comprehension. The body, just as with other types of essays, will comprise of the detailed analysis and explanations of the given term. The various essays, the various ways in which the concept can be looked at can become a part of the detailed explanation process. The conclusion will be concerned with summing up of the different angles that might be used in the definition of the concept. One of the examples of such kind of writing is E.M. Foster's Aspects of a Novel. It attempts in the introduction to define and explore the question of what novel is and its definition. In its subsequent section, it looks into the details. Process: it is categorized under the how-to essay. It is concerned with listening. It is concerned with listing down the process in a methodical manner. A lot of instructions like baking a cake, fixing a car tire, planning a trip, and many more can be done through this form of writing. A process essay is structured around the goal of providing the reader with direction or guidance. Most of the time, students write process essays that discuss how to do something. Process essays are the recipes or technical brochures of essay writing. As a reader of the process essay, you need to identify the thing or action for which instructions are given. You need to judge and understand such a scenario by carefully comprehending the steps and assessing the conclusion it might be leading to. Expository text sample. There have been many studies attempting to figure out just how music affects the human mind. For example, why do different people like different kinds of music? What parts of the brain are activated, and if said parts are affected more or less by different kinds of music and others? Some of these questions have remained unanswered and may might stay might stay that way for a while. One thing, however, is for certain: music does affect our daily lives. Must look at the simple facts. Most people listen to music. If someone doesn't, they are sometimes viewed in a strange way. How could you not listen to music? Music affects our emotions. When we listen to sad things, we tend to feel a decline in mood. When we listen to happy songs, we feel happier. Upbeat songs with energetic riffs and fast-paced rhythms, such as those we hear at sporting events, tend to make us excited and pumped up. With all this in mind, I sent out a survey to the students of Bachelor Linwood High School, asking some simple questions about their music taste and how music makes them feel. Studying these results show some listening facts, some interesting facts. When asked about their listening habits, mixed results were found in accordance to the amount of time spent listening to music on a daily basis. About 22.2% of people said that they listen to music between 1 to 2 hours every day, where another 22.2% said they listen at least 5 hours a day. The category of 2 to 3 hours a day sees about 18.4% of people in the school, and 3 to 4 hours meets a close second to that. At 16.5%, only 11% people listen to less than an hour's worth of music every day, and even less listen to 4 or 5 hours a day, about 9.5%. It seems that there isn't really a happy medium. Either people listen to music a little or they listen to music all the time. Music takes different statements in different people's lives, and it matters more or less to one person than it does another. A majority of people listen to music in the ear as well as at home. About 90% of all those studied for each, around 71% of people here in the school also listen in their classrooms. Both the hallways and the lunchroom receive substantially less, about 37% and 25%. It seems that music helps us concentrate and study as well. Out of those studied, 88.5% of people said that they listen to music when they study, work on homework, and their activities such as that. The levels, and 11.5% of people who don't. It's no surprise that most people, 69%, listen to pop music. Pop literally stands for popular. 55.2% of all people attending BLHS listen to rock and rap. It's also not surprising to hear that 46.6% of people listen to alternative and Indian music and India music. Over half of our students listen to country at 52.3%. Some genres that didn't hit the chart with full force are funk, jazz, classic, punk, dubstep, and metal. Not one of these, with the exception of classical, crossed the 25% line. No matter what people listen to, there seems to be a common consensus as to why they listen. It seems that genres that have a fast-paced, upbeat and catchy rhythm, like pop, rap, etc., are attractive to those who do sports, or at least those who are looking to get pumped up. Rock also stands to achieve this goal. Most people agree that music just makes them happy. They can get into a mood based on the style of the song they are listening to. I must say that I agree. Personally, I listen to rock and metal, pop, punk, and acoustic. That is, if I must limit my choices, I always listen to rock and a whole lot of metalcore. To get pumped up, I listen to rock and metal, sometimes more 80s metal than get pumped up. 80s metal than modern. To help when I am feeling down, I listen to acoustic and pop punk. When angry, I listen to metalcore and sometimes stuff even heavier than that. Overall, there is the final conclusion I could come up with. Music is simply a force that cannot be explained. It messes with our heads. It makes us feel different emotions, sometimes even physically changes us. Music unites us. Some of those surveyed said that they have had friendships established based off music, as have I. In the end, we know that music has a wide range of effects on us. Honestly, maybe honestly, we should leave it at that. Understanding structure and explanation. This essay can be categorized as a problem and solution essay. Right in the beginning of the text, you will find the first paragraph, the introduction, setting up a problem and promising an answer to be given in a systematic manner. On reading the whole essay, you will be able to identify the various efforts and process the writer has involved for the attainment of the solution. The body of the essay lists down how the writer recognized a survey. You will understand that the writer is taking help of the facts the discovered from the survey to provide a solution for the question asked. The thesis statement identified thereof would be, does music affect lives? And the rest of the essay is concerned with answering the same question. The writer lists that music is treated differently by different people, and it is given a variant level of significance by its listeners. She mentions how spaces are also claimed differently by students who listen to music according to where the music is played and how much. She mentions its use in concentration and the more for a student's life. She says that music helps these students by providing them with a rhythm for whichever activity they choose to immerse themselves in school according to their taste. The personality and interest of the students also determine the kind of music they listen to. After discussing some more findings, the writer moves to the conclusion where she asserts music to be an enigma when trying to find how it affects people's lives. She says it surely does, but the ways in which it defines her students' lives are diverse and cannot be fathomed in one go. You, as a reader, can decipher from this conclusion is that a solution is attempted but has not reached towards the end. The writer leaves the end to a philosophical musing of to teach his own. Probable questions. There are 6 kinds of fixed questions which are asked when trying to test the comprehension skills of the student. Vocabulary based question, where the meaning of particular words in the text, their antonyms and synonyms are asked. Direct questions, where the question requires an answer given directly as it is in the text. Interpretative and analytic questions, where inferences need to be drawn from the given text. Main idea, where the reader's ability to comprehend the overall idea of the text is questioned. Supporting ideas, where the detailed information supporting the main idea is asked. Narrative structure, style and tone, where specific structural technicalities like the thesis statement, introduction, body and conclusion are looked at. Sample questions, what is the meaning of the word dubstep in the above passage? What kinds of music make one excited? Can it be said that music affects specific people in a definite way? What is the role of music in the lives of school students? What is the breakdown of percentage of categories of music enjoyed by people? What kind of an essay would you categorize the above mentioned passages as? Reading strategies. Readers read the text and what are the strategies they are to adopt while reading. It is really thing to be discussed with the students for providing them accurate skills of learning. It will help them in understanding and reading the text accurately. Under reading strategies, what do good readers do as they read? One way that researchers have studied what good readers do has been to ask them to think aloud as they read. From these studies, researchers have determined that the seemingly effortless activity described as good reading, is made up of a set of highly complex, well developed, and well practiced skills and abilities. Particularly impressive is the way in which good readers actively and consciously coordinate these skills and strategies before, during, and after reading a text. Before reading, good readers tend to set goals for their reading. These they note the structure or organization of the text, and other create a mental overview or outline of the text to help them decide whether it is relevant to their goals. During reading, good readers read words accurately and quickly and simultaneously deal with meanings of those words as well as the meanings of the phrases and sentences into which the words are grouped. Good readers connect the meaning of one sentence to meaning of another. If something is confusing to them, they use their background knowledge to try to clarify the meanings of words and phrases. Sometimes good readers interact with the text by asking themselves questions about its content and reflecting on its ideas. They are adept at using their background knowledge to make predictions about what might happen next and understand ideas as they encounter them. Good readers continuously evaluate their predictions and revise them as needed. Good readers are selective as they read. They are likely to focus more of their attention on the parts of the text that are most closely tied to their reading goals. They may decide to skip some parts of a text because they already understand the content or because they do not think the parts are important to what they need to learn from the text. They may decide after reading several pages to skip the rest of the chapter because they recently read something similar. On the other hand, they may decide either because they do not clearly understand the content or because they find the topic interesting to reread a passage or chapter before going on. They also may summarize the content of a passage as they read it. In doing so, they may consciously determine what is important, what is supportive, and what is less important. As they read, good readers often make inferences. They may draw on their background knowledge or look for clues in the text to supply information about characters or events that the author has not provided directly. Some good readers may also create mental images or visualize a setting, event, or character to help them understand a passage in a text. Good readers monitor their comprehension as they read. When they realize that they do not understand what they are reading, they apply procedures to repair or fix up their lack of understanding. For example, they may ask themselves questions about the meaning of what they are reading. They may rephrase a passage in their own words. They may look up the meanings of difficult words, or they may outline the content of the text. After reading, good readers often think about or reflect on what they read. They may mentally summarize major points or events in the text or even go to other sources to find additional information about the topic of the reading. In short, good readers are most often strategic readers. That is, they use a number of comprehension strategies to get meaning from text. Comprehension strategies are conscious plans or procedures that are under the control of a reader who makes decisions about which categories to use and when to use them. In addition, good readers engage in metacognition as they read. Cognition refers to mental functions such as remembering, focusing attention, and processing information. Metacognition refers to people's awareness of their cognition, that is, their thoughts about their own thinking from an array of possibilities. For example, readers with metacognitive awareness are able consciously and automatically to select the appropriate comprehension strategies for use with a particular text. Look at the keywords highlighted in the above passage to understand what the act of reading entails. Think loudly. Dear friends, scholars and students, you have heard think, how to think. Generally, we have learned that how to speak loudly, but here we are knowing the concept of how to think loudly. Think loud, think aloud. When you read any piece of any essay or article, the first step should be to try and understand what your eyes are taking in. Once you read the text, having understood it, you can then explain it back to yourself, thinking out loudly to yourself what the passage might mean, has its benefits, and enabling you to understand. Set goals before reading. At any point before beginning to read, it is important to understand the purpose of reading. Are you reading to get a gist of the passage, to answer particular questions, for researcher or for pleasure? For research or for pleasure? Specifically for the purpose of answering questions, you should be aware of the things which need to be looked for within the text. It is good move to find out what is being asked and keeping the points in mind. You can start reading the passage with set objectives. Structure. Finding out the kind of writing or essay it can be categorized in is always beneficial in the process of prompting and understanding of the text. If you are able to identify the type of essay, you will be able to then predict what you might find in the essay. Mental overview. This can be done by using the techniques of skimming when attempting comprehension passages. When you start reading, you begin to make mental notes of certain keywords and lines that give you an overall gist of the passage. Connection between sentences. It is important when reading to create a sense of understanding that is able to connect a sentence with the next. If you read sentences as unrelated to each other, it will hamper your sense of understanding of the passage. Predicate, predict and revise. This allows you to read faster. If you have understood what the passage is about, you recognize what it might be saying, then keep a mindset with the background knowledge you have about the topic. This will allow you to predict what to expect and hence prove a quick way to understand the passage. Be selective when skimming and scanning through a passage. You cannot always retain everything you read. It is hence important that you are able to decide and select the things which you believe are important. Some suggestions would be identify the thesis statement and then proceed to find the supporting notes to it. Other times, when attempting a comprehension passage in exams, you can look at the questions and attempt to identify the important keywords and topics. Summarize. Another strategy to reading comprehension concises is to make a summary of each paragraph in about 2 to 3 lines. In trying to make the summaries, you will be engaging in the act of comprehending. This enhances your understanding of the passage. Visualize. This is not only important but a key feature of practice of reading. Just like the other approaches mentioned above, use your mind to visualize what you read. This comes in handy especially when you do descriptive passages. The very aim of writing descriptive essays is to provide you with ample fodder to visualize what you read and in the process comprehend the writing passage. Metacognition. Metacognition refers to thinking about thinking and was introduced as a concept by John Flavel, who is typically seen as a founding scholar of the field. Flavel said that metacognition is the knowledge you have of your own cognitive processes, your thinking. Flavel, 1979. It is your ability to control your thinking process through various strategies such as organizing, monitoring, and adapting. Additionally, it is your ability to reflect upon the task or processes you understand and to select and utilize the appropriate strategies necessarily in your intercultural interactions. It employs the process of self-regulation and self-policing. It makes you assess your own strengths and weaknesses. Under these modes or techniques, you can attempt to master the art of comprehension. As a good reader, you need to engage in so many of these activities to be able to complete the process or the very act of reading. Reading is a complex activity which, then done with precision and techniques, can help you with your skills of picking up ideas from text. Readens, Bean and Baldwin 2004 suggest a simple procedure to help students recognize, identify and utilize text structure as a way to better comprehend and recall reading from expository text. Excerpt from The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. The lawns are tidy, the facades are gracious, in good repair. They are like the beautiful picture they used to print in the magazines about homes and gardens and interior decoration. There is the same absence of people, the same air of being asleep. The street is almost like a museum or a street in a model town constructed to show the way people used to live, as in those pictures, those museums, those model towns. There are no children. This is the heart of Gilead, where the war cannot intrude except on television, where the edges are we aren't sure. They vary according to the attacks and counterattacks, but this is the center where nothing moves. The Republic of Gilead, said Aunt Lydia, knows no bounds. Gilead is within you. Doctors lived here once, lawyers, university professor. There are no lawyers anymore, and the university is closed. Luca and I used to walk together, sometimes along these streets. We used to talk about buying a house like one of these, an old big house, fixing it up. We would have a garden swing for the children. We would have children, although we know it wasn't too likely we could ever afford it. It was sometimes to talk about a game for Sundays. Such freedom now seems almost weightless. We turn the corner onto a main street where there is more traffic. Cars go by black, most of them some grey and brown. These are other women with baskets, some in red, some in dull green of the Marthas, some in the striped dresses, red and blue and green and cheap and skimpy, that mark the women of the poorer men. Econowives, they are called. These women are not divided into functions. They have to do everything if they can. Sometimes there is a woman all in the black, a widow. There used to be more of them, but they seem to be diminishing. You don't see the commanders' wives on the sidewalks, only in cars. The sidewalks here are content like a child. I avoid stepping on the cracks. I am remembering my feet on these sidewalks in the time before and what I used to wear on them. Sometimes it was shoes for running with cushioned soles and breathing holes and stars of fluorescent fabric that reflected light in the darkness. Though I never ran at night and in the daytime, only beside well frequented roads, women were not protected them. I remember the rules that were never spelled out, but that every woman knew. Don't open your door to a stranger, even if he says he is the police. Make him slide his ID. Make him slide his ID under the door. Don't stop on the road to help a motorist pretending to be a trouble. Keep the logs on and keep going. If anyone whistles, don't turn to look. Don't go into a laundromat by yourself at night. I think about laundromats, what I wore to them, shorts, jeans, jogging pants, what I put into them, my own clothes, my own shop, my own money and money I had earned myself. I think about having such control. Now we walk along the same street in red pairs and no man shouts obscenities at us, speaks to us, touches us, no one whistles. There is more than one kind of freedom, said Aunt Lydia. Freedom to and freedom from. In the days of anarchy, it was freedom to. Now you are being given freedom from. Don't underrate it. To the right is the store where we order dresses. Sonic people call them habits. A good word for them. Habits are hard to break. The store has a huge wooden sign outside it in the shape of golden lilies of the field it's called. You can see the place under the lily where the lettering lettering was painted out when they decided that even the names of shops were too much temptation for us. Now places are known by their sign alone. Lily's used to be a movie theater before. Students went there a lot. Every spring they had a Humphrey Bogart festival with Lorraine Bacall or Catherine Hefner, women on their own, making up their minds. They wore blouses with buttons down the front that suggested the possibilities of the word undone. These women could be undone or not. They seem to be able to choose. They seem to be able to choose when then we were a society dying, said Aunt Lydia, of too much choice. I don't know when they stopped having the festival. I must have been grown up, so I didn't notice. We don't go into Lily's, but across the road and along a side street. Nagasaki, nearly 9 years ago, on a warm autumn evening in 1945, I was driving over the mountains of southern Japan to the city of Nagasaki. I thought I was still in open country when all at once I realized that I was already crossing what had been the city. The shadows which flickered past me in the dusk were not rocks and trees. They were crushed buildings, the bare and skewed ribs of factories and two crumpled gasometers. The scale of damage of Nagasaki drained the blood from my heart then and does so now when I speak of it. For 3 miles my road lay through a desert which men had made a second. Now 9 years later, the hydrogen bomb is ready to dwarf this scale and to turn each mile of destruction into 10 miles, and then citizens and scientists share at one another and ask, how did we blunder into this nightmare? I put this first as a question of history because the history of this is known to few people. The fission of uranium was discovered by 2 German scientists a year before the war. Within a few months, it was reported that Germany had forbidden the export of uranium from the mines of Czechoslovakia, which she had just annexed. Scientists on the continent in England and America asked themselves whether the secret weapon on which the Germans were said to be working as an atomic bomb, if the fission of uranium could be used explosively, and this already seemed possible in 1939, it might in theory make an exposition a million times larger than hitherto. The monopoly of such an atomic bomb would give Hitler instant victory and make him master of Europe and the world. The scientists knew the scale of what they feared very well. They feared first dissolution and then slavery. With heavy hearts, they told Albert Einstein what they knew of atomic fission. Einstein had been a pacifist all his life, and he did not easily put his conscience on one side, but it seemed clear to him that no scientist was free to keep this knowledge to himself. He felt that no one could decide whether a nation should or should not use atomic bomb except the nation itself. The choice must be offered to the nation. and made by those whom the nation has elected to act for it. On August 1939, a month before Hitler invaded Poland, Einstein wrote to President Roosevelt to tell him that he thought an atomic bomb might be made, and he feared that the Germans were trying to make one. This is how it came about that later in the war, scientists worked together to England, in Canada and America to make the atomic bomb. They hated war no less than the layman does, no less than the soldier does. They too had wrestled with their consciences, and they had decided what their duty was: to let the nation use their skill just as it uses the skill of the soldier or the expert in camouflage. The atomic scientists believed that they were in a race against Germany whose outcome might decide the war even its last weeks. We know now that the race was almost a walkover. The Germans were indeed trying to make an atomic explosion, and they thought that they were ahead of the allies. But by our standards, what they had done was pitiful. They had not made a pile that worked, and they believed that the fast chain reaction of an atom bomb was impossible. The Nazis had made fundamental science a poor relation and put it under second rate party men with splendid titles. And more deeply, the Nazis had sapped the pith and power of research, the quizzical eye and questioning mind, the urge to find the facts for oneself. There were not enough unconventional ideas in the German atomic projects, not when the younger men did put up some. Their readers always knew better. A descriptive story. Argumentative text. How to read different type of passages. If the passage is argumentative, how to read it. It also comes in reading strategies. So learners must know about it. Argumentative text. Structure of argumentative text. It is very important for you to understand the structure of an essay in order to grasp the meaning of the essay. It is essential thus that you are able to clearly see the organization of the paragraph and understand the progression of thought. Generally, 5-paragraph rule is followed by the writers in different types of essays. Argumentative essays, which require research sources and empirical research data, usually exceed 5 paragraphs to present a comprehensive view on the essay. The argumentative essay begins with the first paragraph, which is the introductory paragraph. It is followed by 3-5 evidentiary paragraphs forming the body of the essay. This part consists of the evidences and also the discussion of opposing views. The body of the essay comprises of the arguments and the counter views. The body of the essay comprises of the arguments and the counter arguments by the writer, and finally reasons and data to support each side of the argument. Finally comes your conclusion, which is summing up of the main idea behind the essay. Also keep in mind that you carefully look at the transition between these paragraphs. Transition from one paragraph to another or from one idea to another act as a mortar that holds the foundation of the entire essay together. It is important for you to understand the logical progression of the argument given by the writer. Now let us look at the structure of these essays in detail. In the first paragraph, a clear, concise and defined thesis statement occurs. A review of the topic is given where the context of the topic is set. It is followed by the author talking about the need of discussing the topic. This is called exegesis. So, learners and listeners, you are listening how to read strategically and technically. It is also a technique to understand reading, writing and speaking modules of the learning. So dear brothers and sisters, it is early in the morning time for the professionals and not for the students and scholars, because early in the morning between 2 to 5 it is known as the most richest and the valuable time of the day, because in 2 to 5 there is a lot of energy and oxygen we take from the environment and atmosphere, and it heals us so many diseases by doing pranayama, yogasana, meditation. It is our ancient and traditional therapy and treatment which is provided by nature free of cost. So we must get up early in the morning. Being a scholar, being a student and being an officer, it is our prime duty to be cheerful, and we are to be friendly with nature and atmosphere, and we are to spend very much time with the nature while walking, singing, listening a music which is played by the nature, a light which is created by the nature. That is awesome, and there is no thing that can be compared with these magical, musical and majestic things of the nature. Nature teaches us like a teacher, it nurtures us like a mother, and it treats us like a doctor. So nature plays multidimensional, multi-sided, multifaceted roles. About the nature, so many poets, writers, novelists, essayists have explained that nature never beat us, never cheat us, never defeat us and never deceive us. But it is really friendly and familiar with us at every level, and bottom to top, root to fruit, from our child to old stages and ages of life. It helps in formatting, in reforming and forming our life in this world, because nature is very innocent and tender, and by the temperament of the nature, and by the nature of nature we feel we are near the God, because the presence of Lord, presence of God is always with them. It is entirely different matter that they cannot get and attain and obtain salvation. It is entirely different thing, because it is the right in the hands of man only. Man is created supreme by the God in his own form. Firstly, when he created this universe all over the world, he generated and created different type of statues in the form of 84 lakh species. He generated many species that are not studied and counted even now by the man's study, but research is going on, and 84 lakh species were generated by him firstly. Then ultimately he made a form how the soul can reunite with the God, because there is nobody in the form of animal, plant, trees, creatures. They cannot unite again with that super spiritual power of God or Lord. It is not, it was not given the right to other species in the form of flora and fauna, but they are the server, helper and provider to the man. So it's man's duty to be dutiful and to be humble for the nature and be natural with plants and trees. So it's the right of man to attain and obtain salvation from the cycle of birth and death. When man came on this earth, God made his own form in the form of man, and he put into it a number of qualities. Man is supreme and nature is the slave of man. So it is man's duty to be kind, to be humanistic, compassionistic and sympathetic for the natural changes. Nature gives us energy, a lot of energy. Dear brother and sisters, friends, you know that in the form of different natural objects and elements, we have around us the sun, the moon, the sky, the earth, the ocean. Different type of objects and elements of nature we have around the man and near the God. But we are to have the close contact in the form of energy in the mind, in the form of meditation. We must appreciate, praise and admire the natural objects and elements of the nature. The sun, which is selflessly working for us, selflessly providing services to us. The oceans providing water to us selflessly, free of cost. It is the gift of nature. And the air that we have around us, that is also the part of element of nature and being provided free of cost. So all the elements, air, fire, soil, sky and water, are working and serving, providing services to us free of cost. So many employees of the God are working without any expectation because they are assigned their duties and they are given their duties unrelentingly, unceasingly, and unstoppingly. They are working by the order and law of God. It is the law and order of the Lord which made us very comfortable and luxurious. But we must have association, close association with these objects and elements, and we should appreciate in the form of nature, praise the Lord. So it is our duty for getting the salvation and emancipation. God is creator, operator, caretaker, he who is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, and almighty Lord, a power and energy, who he was, who he is, and who he will, always with us. We are not to forget, after running the false affection, falsification, negativities, ego, lust, avariciousness. These are the most dangerous evils and the most irremediable diseases of the soul that can be treated and that can be improved, handled only by the presence of Lord, only by the presence of God. How we can remember, recollect and revisualize the God? Simply in all the different religions, we have the different religious places. We must visit these places with 100% devotion and with 100% present sense of mind. When we enter at such places, we should forget about the past and future. So that presence of God, that presence of Lord will give us peace and prosperity of mind. If you are learner, you are education, you are studied and you are good educationist or educated, you must go through the words of God in appreciation. You must write some words in admiring God and in praise of the Lord. You must listen, read, write, speak and learn that unread, unspoken, unlearned and unlistened power of Lord. God who is providing us, giving us power to speak, read, write and listen. We cannot count the uncountable. We cannot change the unchangeable. We cannot understand the ununderstandable. But it is in the hands of man. It is given in the form of right to a man that he can change his fortune, his luck by changing his actions. Actions are given. Freedom of doing actions are given by the Lord to man only. When God sent this soul on this earth, promised and so many terms and conditions given to man for reuniting him, because he himself says that body is the temple of God and heart is the seat of God. Heart is a unique place of living God or Lord, because it is the sacred place in the holy body of the holy land. We have different type of organs in the human body, but why God has selected the heart? It is really a thing to be discussed and a thing to be admired that God has created for us. Why the God has occupied this place? Cardiologists and heart specialists sometimes make and might think about it, but it is the matter of feelings, passions, emotions, and so more spirit that we have inside from the soul that does matter, which cannot be visualized and seen by the naked eyes. As per the example of hormones, we understand hormones that we have in our human body, in our cell of the body, in the form of waves of sound and in the form of rays of light, in the form of vibrations we have in our human body. We feel only in that form. There is no other way that can give us the appropriate and suitable knowledge, information, and direction inside the human body. Different type of medical branches and different type of specialists and doctors know this thing, that inside the body there are varieties of the organs, and how do they interact each other, how do they communicate each other, how they have their individuality. It is really a thing of research. Students of medical science know this thing, that when they operate and when they do surgery, they understand a lot of miracles and magics of the Lord, and they understand it as a divine gift of God. Man's mind has limit. Every man's mind has limitations of their thoughts and ideas. But on some extent, at the level of highest level of thinking, man feels that in some situations, when a patient reaches at the height of death, on the verge of death, then a patient is provided ICU. ICU means that patient himself or herself is responsible for his dying, for his death. In that position, it is rightly applicable. God helps themselves. God helps those who helps themselves. In that condition, only our soul power can treat us, can escape us, save us from the drastic disease. So dear friends, brothers and sisters, you know that it is in the power of nature. Nature can bring change, oceanic and visionary change, revolutionary change in our nation, society, personally and professionally, in our human body, in the adverse circumstances. Whenever we remember the words of God in the presence of different helpers, then we feel the utmost power of Lord. Doctors are known as the form of God because they save us from the irremediable disease. But at the last stage of life, nobody can save us. At that time, angels of God come to take us at the real home, which is the real home of the soul. In this life and after this life, everywhere man is recorded, man's activities are calculated, accounted, advocated, treated by the different employers of the God who are working selflessly. They never take bribe. They do not accept any kind of gift from the man, because they are the most powerful as per the command of God. They will handle with this soul. If we do the meditation, by doing the meditation, we will know that what's right, what's wrong. And we cannot forget while doing any misdeed. By doing yoga, meditation, pranayama, we can keep our body fit and fine for a long time. But in the cleaning of the body, at the cleanser place of the body, who will sit inside? Only it needs the perfection of the deity, God or goddesses. If we are the strongest believer, ardent believer of the words of God, waves of sound of God, rays of light of God, only in that condition we can provide our place in the heart for that unique power of God. But there is no use of physical interaction with that supreme power. It can be possible sometimes, but it is in the power of the word of God, it is in the power of blessings of the Lord. As we are noticing that all the online programs in radio, TV, transistor, mobile, laptops, computer, different type of electronic devices work with the electricity and provide us the information, give us introductions of the different things while sitting thousands kilometers away from one place to another. How do we get the information? How do we communicate with a person who is so much away from us? Likely that we have the presence of Lord inside us. He can talk to us. He can walk with us. He can eat with us. He can speak, read, write, listen, and even think with us, because everything that we think come from the thinking of Lord. So we are to think before think. It is a great training of spiritual meditation. It requires the method of meditation firstly, then we repeat the God's words in the presence of nature with the true heart. Then God's devotion creates in us, and we provide our body to God for residing His rays of light and for the moving of waves of sound and vibration in the human body. Neurologist in the medical, when they operate any particular part of the human body, they are to inject for creating unconsciousness in that particular part. For likely that the meditation works. Religion is known as the mega science. All the different types of subjects that we study in the form of branches of medical science, engineering, arts, commerce, all are generated, created, formulated and operated from the nature. And again, nature plays the multi-dimensional, multi-sided, multifaceted roles. If there is anything in the words to be praised, that is atmosphere, environment and nature of our nature. Thanks, readers and ladies and gentlemen, students and scholars, you are listening the truth of science and spirituality with the presence of Lord, He who He is, He who was, and He who will, in past, present and future, the same. So we should remember Him in all the conditions, positions for uplifting our nation and society. Brothers and sisters, respectable members of our society and nation, nice to meet you, nice to listen you. I welcome all of you. You can listen daily the truth of science and spirituality. It is nice time, nice place, nice action. Thanks all of you. Many thanks.